looking at a live view of Falcon 9. We are currently awaiting liftoff at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida.
Spacecraft is on internal power.
I'm Tucker Spencer Wallace, a mission integration engineer here at SpaceX in Hawthorne, California. Today we are launching the SpainSat NG II satellite to a geostationary transfer orbit on behalf of our customer, Hisdesat. Hisdesat is a government satellite operator and service provider operating secure communication satellites, synthetic aperture Earth observation satellites, and maritime monitoring. Hisdesat has provided Earth observation services with radar technology through the PATH satellite, which SpaceX launched on a Falcon 9 back in 2018. SpainSat NG is a program developed by Hisdesat to improve the secure satellite communications and defense capabilities of the Spanish government, its allies, and international organizations including the European Union's GovSatcom and NATO. Spainsat will cover an extensive area that ranges from the United States and South America to the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and Singapore. The first of the satellites, SpainSat NG II, was launched on a Falcon 9 in January of this year and placed into geostationary position at 29 degrees east. This launch will place SpainSat NG II into geostationary position at 30 degrees west. Due to the additional performance required to deliver this payload to orbit, this will be the 22nd and final flight for the Falcon 9 first stage booster supporting this mission. At T-minus 12 minutes, we are looking good for an on-time liftoff. If, for any reason, we are unable to launch today, a backup opportunity is available tomorrow with a 4-hour launch window opening at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The vehicle is currently healthy, the range is ready to support. Weather is go for launch, so let's take a moment to meet our SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket. The two-stage Falcon 9 vehicle with the payload fairing is 70 meters or 229 feet tall. When fully loaded, it will hold just over 1 million pounds of propellant, which the vehicle will burn through in less than 3 minutes after liftoff. At launch, Falcon 9 produces more than 1.7 million pounds of thrust, and rockets like Falcon 9 don't use all that power just to go straight up. Early in flight, Falcon 9 will perform a gravity turn, a smooth pitch maneuver that tilts the rocket sideways to build up horizontal velocity. You may hear this call out about 10 seconds into launch as vehicle pitching downrange. Once the first stage completes its portion of the mission, it will shut down and separate. A staged rocket like Falcon 9 sheds the booster so that stage 2 and the payload can keep climbing faster and more efficiently. At the bottom of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines that propel Falcon 9 off the ground and up to the thinner parts of Earth's atmosphere. The first stage is designed to be reflown with minimal refurbishment between flights. As mentioned at the top of the show, due to the additional performance required to deliver today's payload to orbit, this will be the 22nd and final flight for the first stage booster supporting this mission. This booster first launched on November 26, 2022, and has since then logged 1,062 days in service. Over the course of its career, it has launched 3 times from Space Launch Complex 39A at Kennedy Space Center, and today will be its 19th launch from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It has returned from orbit to Earth 21 times, landing on a Droneship in the ocean 18 times, and on land 3 times. So today we will say farewell to a booster that has served us and our customers well, having launched NASA's CRS-26 cargo resupply mission, OneWeb Launch 16, Intelsat IS-40E, SES-03B mPOWER-C, Ovzon 3, Eutelsat 26D, Turksat 6A, Maxar 2, SXM-9, and 12 Starlink missions. Our payload today, SpainSat NG II, is safely enclosed inside of the 17-foot diameter payload fairing, which is the structure at the very top of the rocket. Made of a carbon composite material, the 2 sides of the fairing form a clamshell around the satellite to protect it during ascent. The fairing halves are then separated at about 3.5 minutes into flight, after which they will parachute back to Earth. If recovery goes to plan, the fairings will be pulled from the ocean and prepped to fly again. The fairing halves supporting today's mission are flight-proven, with one half flying for its 28th time and the other flying for its 16th time. Below the fairing, we have the second stage, which is the part of the rocket that will take the payload to space today. The second stage will ignite its single Merlin vacuum engine, or MVAC for short, about 2 minutes and 48 seconds into flight, and will then relight for a second time before we deploy the satellite. With its extended nozzle and optimized design, the MVac drives maximum performance in the vacuum of space. While the countdown continues, let's find out more about the satellite that we're delivering to orbit today, SpainSat NG II.
The SpainSat NG program will provide a sovereign, secure communications capability for government missions, with 2 new generation satellites based on Airbus's Eurostar Neo platform, which is developed under the European Space Agency's partnership projects. The SpainSat NG program is under the responsibility of Hisdesat.
Hisdesat is an international service provider of X and military K1 for government and military applications. Our role in the program SpainSat NG is to be the customer of the full program, including the space and ground segment, the launch, and the operation and exploitation of the satellite during 15 years lifetime.
What's unique about the SpainSat NG program is the PASSIS 3 funding partnership model.
PASSIS 3 is a financial scheme to develop the most innovative elements of the SpainSat NG payload with the support of the Center for Technological and Industrial Development, CBTI, in a framework of a private-public partnership between the European Space Agency and Hisdesat as an operator of the satellite.
The most innovative element of the payload is the X-band active antenna system, comprising both receive and transmit antennas.
Something as complex as the DRA's antenna in X-band, an active antenna that can move the beams electronically and can configure the beam electronically without any movement, is what makes this satellite the most advanced one in Europe today.
These active antennas are at the cutting edge of new technology, with beam hopping and geolocation capabilities enabling artificial intelligence, big data, and the Internet of Things on the ground. The antennas are being developed by Airbus, which is leading a consortium of 5 Spanish space companies.
The active antennas are already in production. Actually, they are in the assembly, integration, and test phase. That is the last phase before delivery of the antenna. It's done in Barajas site in Airbus Defense Space in Spain, and it will be delivered to Toulouse.
For SpainSat NG-I, the mating between the communication module and the service module has taken place in Airbus facilities in Toulouse. This was the first step of the final satellite AIT phase.
The SpainSat NG program has been a very good example of institutional and industrial collaboration. In the industrial part, it has been a very good collaboration between the 2 main industries in Europe, being Airbus and Thales Aerospace, including all the Spanish industries in this important program.
Airbus works to safeguard Europe's citizens and strategic autonomy. Through SpainSat NG, it will provide secure, resilient, and flexible communications for those who keep us safe.
Next up in the countdown, the transporter erector, or TE, will begin to retract away from Falcon 9. That is the large truss structure you see standing next to the rocket. It is hinged at the base and connected to the launch mount beneath the first stage. First, we'll see the clamp arms open around the second stage.
Suppressing for strong back retract.
And that's a good indication that we are on track for an on-time liftoff as the transporter erector prepares to retract. Like I said, first we'll see the clamp arms open around the second stage, and then the TE will begin to pivot back, slowly swinging away from the rocket. It'll reach full recline by T-minus 3 minutes and 40 seconds. You may also hear the TE called the strongback, the same structure.
Strongback retract has started.
Different name. And as you heard there, strongback retract has begun, so watch for those arms to start to open. The TE does roll the Falcon 9 out to the pad. It also raises it vertical and stays connected through the final seconds to launch. It provides fuel, power, telemetry, and command connections between ground systems and the rocket. We're just about to see those clamp arms start to open around the second stage of the vehicle. Those clamps help to stabilize the second stage during propellant loading and are also there to prevent movement in high winds. Once they're open, the rocket will be fully free at the top. And there you can see on your screen, those clamp arms have fully opened. The launch tower's strong back is now beginning to move away from Falcon 9, allowing it to stand freely before liftoff. The TE has two components, a strong back alongside Falcon 9 and a launch mount underneath. The launch mount has 4 hold downs that release at T0. The strong back is hinged to that launch mount and is rotating about 2 degrees away from Falcon 9. At liftoff, the strong back will move 45 degrees away to clear the way for Falcon 9's launch. At this point in the countdown, both the first and second stages are nearly fully loaded with 1 million pounds of kerosene fuel and liquid oxygen. The first stage and second stage should finish loading liquid oxygen.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
And there you just heard, the first stage has finished LOX loading. Liquid oxygen loading for the first stage is the final propellant load for the booster. The tanks are also pressurized using helium, which is chilled so that it stays compatible with the cryogenic plumbing. During flight, that pressurization helps force propellant into the engines as the tanks empty. At T-minus 60 seconds, Falcon 9 will enter startup. At that point, the rocket's onboard flight computers will take over, and from there on out, the countdown will be fully autonomous. Just inside of T-minus 2 seconds, the 9 Merlin 1D engines will ignite, and once they're at full power, Falcon 9 will lift off the pad and begin its climb to orbit. After that engine start, the Falcon vehicles are held down until all vehicle systems are verified as functioning normally before we release for liftoff.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And liquid oxygen for the second stage is now fully loaded, completing prop load for the upper stage. You can see white condensation clouds starting to vent from the rocket. As the liquid oxygen warms slightly inside the tanks, some of it will boil off, and that gas is vented to manage pressure. When the vented oxygen hits the warm, humid outside air, it will instantly condense into clouds, which is the same principle as your breath on a cold morning.
Current gas closeouts.
Standing by now for confirmation that Falcon 9 is in startup at the T-minus 1 minute mark.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
As you just heard, the autonomous flight computers have taken over the launch countdown, and stages 1 and 2 are pressurizing for launch.
Go for launch.
We just heard the launch give the final go. With that, let's listen into the countdown.
T-minus 30 seconds. T-minus 15 seconds. T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff. Go Falcon, go SpainSat NG II.
Vehicle is pitching downrange.
M1D chamber pressure is nominal.
As you can see, Falcon 9 has lifted off from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. The Falcon flight computer will now begin throttling down engines in preparation for max Q, or maximum aerodynamic pressure.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Good call out there for a nominal state of the vehicle.
Vehicle is supersonic. Max Q.
As you just heard, we've just passed through Max Q. Again, that is the maximum aerodynamic pressure the vehicle will experience. In order to achieve orbit and avoid being pulled back to Earth, the Falcon 9 rocket needs to reach a velocity of roughly 17,500 miles per hour horizontally. To assist with this, the first stage performs a gravity turn, initiated by a pitch-over maneuver just 10 seconds into flight. This is also the engines gimbal a small amount for about 5 seconds, slowly turning the first stage into an angled trajectory. This angled trajectory combined with gravity's pull will place the rocket into the final horizontal flight path. You can track our progress to orbit by keeping an eye on the first and second stage telemetry in the bottom corners of your display. Now we are going to have several events coming up in quick succession, starting with main engine cutoff, or MECO, when we shut down the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage. Following that, the first and second stages will separate. Following that, we'll have the first ignition of the MVAC engine, also known as SES-1. SES-1 will shortly be followed by fairing separation.
Stage separation confirmed.
Main engine cutoff. MVAC startup.
And there you heard and saw those events that happened back to back: MECO, stage sep, and SES-1. As a reminder, the first stage will not be recovered today. In preparation for this, we removed the landing legs and grid fins to decrease the mass of the first stage and save them for use on future missions. But for now, we say to the first stage, thank you and farewell. Fairing separation is next in just a few seconds. We will be attempting to retrieve both fairing halves once they fall back to Earth using our recovery vessel, Doug.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And as you just heard, fairing separation has been confirmed. These fairings will orient themselves with gas thrusters for entry into the atmosphere. As they near the ocean, each fairing half, we use a gas-powered deployer to release a parachute. The fairing computer will send commands that steer the fairing to the ocean landing, where Doug will attempt to recover them. With that confirmation, we have a few minutes between our next major milestone event, SECO-1, when we'll shut down our MVAC engine on the second stage. We're going to take a short break, and we'll be back in about T+7 minutes.
Stage 1 FTS has saved.
Welcome back to SpaceX's live launch coverage of the SpainSat NG II mission. Liftoff occurred at 9:30 p.m. Eastern Time from Space Launch Complex.
Terminal guidance.
From Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. And we've had a nominal flight so far. As we mentioned before the break, coming up next, we'll shut down our MVAC engine on the second stage, also referred to as SECO-1, which should occur at about T plus 8 minutes. After that, we're going to look for confirmation of good orbital insertion. The MVAC engine is optimized to operate in space, producing...
Stage 2 FTS has safed.
There you just heard that our Stage 2 FTS has safed. As I was saying, the MVAC engine is optimized to operate in space, producing 220,550 pounds of thrust in vacuum, and is designed to be stopped and restarted multiple times.
MVAC shutdown.
And there you heard the call out for second engine cutoff, or SECO-2, as MVAC shutdown. We're now awaiting confirmation of nominal orbital insertion.
Nominal orbit insertion.
And we have confirmation of nominal orbital insertion. The second stage is now embarking on its coast phase. After the coast phase, we will light that MVAC engine for a second time, just before the T plus 27 minute mark. And that will be followed by payload deploy around the T plus 34 minute mark. We'll see you back here at about T plus 25 minutes. And we're back with live coverage of the SpainSat NG II mission. Recapping events so far, we had an on-time liftoff at 9:30 p.m. Eastern from Space Launch Complex 40 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station in Florida. We saw a successful main engine cutoff, stage separation, and the first light of our MVAC engine, or SES-1. That was followed by fairing separation. Those fairing halves are currently being recovered by a recovery ship, Doug. This was the 28th flight for one fairing half and the 16th flight for the other. We also heard the call out for second engine cutoff, or SECO-1, and confirmed nominal orbital insertion. We are now moments away from lighting the MVAC engine for a second time to propel the stack into geostationary transfer orbit. Now let's wait for those callouts. We'll be expecting this call out coming in just about 30 seconds.
MVAC startup.
And as you just heard, our Merlin engineering team has confirmed that we have power on the second stage engine. This burn will last approximately 67 seconds, typical for a geostationary transfer mission. If you watch the speed gauge on your screen, you'll see us adding over 2,500 meters per second to the velocity of the second stage and the SpainSat NG II payload. Maximum acceleration during this burn will reach 4.8 Gs as the remaining propellant is burned off. Stay tuned for second engine cutoff, or SECO-2.
MVAC shutdown.
And with that second engine cutoff, or SECO-2, we're just a few minutes away from payload deploy. We're going to take one more short break until that event, and we'll see you back here in just about 2 minutes. Welcome back to the SpainSat NG II mission. We've had a great mission so far, and we're now approaching payload deploy for our customer, Hisdesat. Today's satellite will be placed into a geostationary position at 30 degrees west. SpainSat NG I, which SpaceX launched earlier this year, and SpainSat NG II, this launch, will eventually replace the current SpainSat and X-Star satellites. Hisdesat is a government satellite operator, providing secure satellite services to government agencies in various countries. Hisdesat has provided Earth observation services with radar technology through the PATH satellite, which SpaceX launched on a Falcon 9 back in 2018. SpainSat NG is a part of a program developed by Hisdesat to improve secure satellite communications and defense capabilities for the Spanish government and others. SpainSat NG will cover an extensive area that ranges from the United States and South America to the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and Singapore. Now let's hold tight as we come up on payload deploy shortly. If you're just joining us now, we are currently awaiting the payload deploy of the SpainSat NG II satellite into geostationary transfer orbit. And we're just now expecting payload deploy in about 1 minute.
Payload deploy confirmed.
And there you just heard the call out, and you can see the successful deployment of the SpainSat NG II satellite as it begins its journey to its destination geostationary orbit. And with that, we're going to wrap up our coverage for today. All of us at SpaceX want to give a big thank you to our customer, Hisdesat. We also want to give a shout out to the Eastern Range and Federal Aviation Administration for supporting today's launch. If you're interested in more launch coverage, head over to spacex.com/launches for the most up-to-date information. When you're there, check out our departure board featuring our upcoming launches and all the details you'll need to join us next time. And remember to follow us at SpaceX on X. We'll see you again soon.